Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Heart of the Cast. My name is Farfa, and also joined by the usual Mr. Joshua Schmidt.
Hello.
We have a very, very special guest today, MBT, My Big Titties. Hello.
So your podcast is failing. You gotta bring in the ringer. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro himself, Joseph Rogers. Oh my god. How's everybody doing this morning?
I regret this already.
So, I don't know if you've followed any of the episodes so far, but what we like to do for the first 10 minutes or so before we get into the topic is usually just shoot the shit and stuff. Talk a little bit about some non-Yu-Gi-Oh, I suppose, for the first 10 minutes or so. So, yeah, what's been new with you? What have you been doing
don't worry.
recently?
I came prepared for exactly this part.
Okay.
No, I've been doing fine. We're dog sitting this week. My wife and I. And so instead of one small dog, we have 3 big dogs. And I did not understand how big dogs' gastrointestinal system works. So the entire house smells like a blast zone. They're well-trained dogs. They aren't like doo-dooing and pee-peeing all everywhere, but they're blowing it up. It's not good. It smells like locals.
Oh my god.
I'm not a
Oh,
dog.
It's a fun thing that's happened this week we could talk about. Oh, do you guys care about the Kendrick Drake thing?
Dude, I was deep diving into that. I don't know if you care that much, Josh, but it was crazy.
I definitely saw it. It was impossible to avoid it, but I personally haven't looked into it, no. Because I also don't really know either of them very well.
Neither do
or their
I.
music.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the name of a Drake song, but apparently
All I know is that
That's
apparently
impossible.
Kendrick
Are you kidding
won.
me? Can't tell anyone the name of a Drake song? You've never heard
Joseph,
the one
I've been
dance.
listening to the same Linkin Park and Breaking Benjamin albums on repeat for like 17 years now. I do not know what a Drake song sounds like.
You're like, yeah, I actually prefer video game OSTs. It's okay. You're not.
Persona 5
not missing
soundtrack
much on
3,
Drake.
etc., etc.
Yeah. Oh man, that's
What
depressing.
do you think of the conspiracy that it's all like set up and done on purpose, like just to increase
No.
their stream, etc., etc.
I did like for a day and a half, everyone was like, yeah, these two planned it in order to like get more revenue. And it's like, okay, I can buy that up to the point where Kendrick's like, Drake, you're a pedophile.
Surely you can like put up a drama without, like
Dyer's
like-
tweet on this is just moi, like perfect.
It's good.
For anyone who
It's like
hasn't
if I
heard
was
it,
like-
go ahead, you can tell it.
It's like, no, the tweet is just let me explain this in Yu-Gi-Oh terms. It'd be like if Drake went, hey Kendrick, you only won because of that top deck, and Kendrick was like, Drake, you're a pedophile. Like, I get it, and I think it has like they have gotten a lot of like fame off of it. I guess they're already super famous, but it'd be like if I was like, hey Josh, let's do a series together, and he's like, okay, and I was like, here, I'll be the heel, and I'll be like, ooh, you stink, and he'd be like, shut up, you fucking trash player. Be like, oh, okay, all right, that's.
Speaking of
right.
insults, I picked up on your racism controversy, which I feel like is every other week, but.
What do you? Jeez, that could refer to so much.
What did you call
Which
Gage?
one?
what did you call Gage when I was about to attack him for game? You don't
I
remember?
have no. Oh, you mean Doug?
Oh, was it Doug? Okay.
Yeah, I called him a white demon. I told you to send it back to Yakub, right? But I mean, that episode he was being a white demon.
Man, yeah, I guess he was.
Oof.
We gotta
maybe I-
like put together some drama. Like, what could we like argue about?
We do.
who are we calling a pedophile?
Whoa, Josh went straight for the throat, dude.
I mean,
was
that's
gonna-
how it works, doesn't it?
I was gonna start with like some stacking accusations or something. This guy's just going straight to that department. Okay.
It worked for Kendrick, didn't it?
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly. Yeah.
I thought it was really cool how
Same
like
concept.
his record label was removing all of the copyright strikes on a bunch of content creators and stuff. Like apparently there's like it's we live in this like bubble, but you know how there's like we're like the new card reaction streamers, right? But there's like rap diss track streamers. Like they just
Yeah.
react to diss tracks,
Yeah.
which sounds
Yeah.
insane and impossible because how the hell do you make money with like the constant copyright flagging? But his record label removed all of the copyright infringement.
To make
Strikes.
sure they could like react to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
they
and people
basically wanted there to be
Yeah.
10,000 people going, "Wow, he did that was great."
A minor, and they've all been reporting that they've been making like life-changing money from this like whole ordeal, which is
Oh yeah.
which is well that's how it was for me, or how it will be for me when we get the Dante retrain. I can't wait.
Are you gonna do reaction videos?
Oh hell yeah, absolutely. All right, we have a little minor drop on the thing, but don't worry, I'm recording it, so this will
A
be nice
minor
and...
drop. I see.
Wow.
Dude, the I'm not gonna rag on the British internet just yet, but it's been very unstable today. I don't know why. Anyway, yeah. Any other topics come to mind, Josh? What you've been doing recently?
I don't know. It is Yu-Gi-Oh related, but I did vocals with Paleos. I had a great time.
Did you
I don't
burst
know if
on
they
anyone?
did. I did burst on a lot of people, and I also I used Witch Strike against Voiceless Voice. That was cool.
So, did you like play Witcher Strike? Because it's like,
Yeah.
Is it good? Like, do you think, or like, was it just like?
Well,
Kind
I
of a
don't
joke,
main
or...
it, but the idea is that you side it against matchups that have Omni negates, like Voiceless Voice, because otherwise that's really hard to deal with if they have an Omni negate every turn. And then you just you don't have to specifically have Witch's Strike, but you can also copy it with rollback, right?
Does it like auto win the game if you resolve it?
You can copy
I mean, it
Witch's
destroys their
Strike
hand
with
and field.
rollback.
What are they gonna do?
Well, yeah, but like, I assume they don't have any like grave resources and stuff that gets them back, because I can imagine
Not
destroying.
really. They can like trigger the ritual spell in the grave to summon one more ritual monster, but that's it. Like they pretty much lose.
Very cute.
But it has been nice seeing you tinker with the paleo list, and I will say I am starting to cope.
Yeah, I mean, I was net decking Josh like shit in 2016. I think I copied like all of his deck lists during that specific season, and Paleo was one of them. It's a really cool deck, and Rollback I think has created just so much fucking like, what's the word? Deck building.
I love rollback.
Yeah.
It lets you play the game in so many different ways. By the way, are we completely relying on the stream VOD, or are you recording this?
Yeah.
Like...
Don't worry. It's all recorded.
Okay.
And
Because the stream seems to be
not doing great.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to like call up about this at some point, but yeah, don't worry. It should be all good on the recording side. Anyway, let's move into today's topic, I suppose. Today we're discussing. This is probably the most sensitive and controversial subject we've had on the podcast.
Good thing we brought MBT on for that.
Yeah.
Why do we
I'm
like
writing the
Yu-Gi-Oh?
slurs now.
Why do we enjoy the game? What is it about Yu-Gi-Oh that's so good? I love Yu-Gi-Oh Bat Chest.
I suggested this, and Farfa said, "So you want another co-host for this one?"
I was gonna say, well, every month, there is a check that comes from YouTube and goes into my bank account, and that makes me like Yu-Gi-Oh for about one more month.
And then repeat as such.
Is that
Yes.
actually how you guys feel, though?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Unironically, I love this game.
Okay.
I think I've bought like 3 decks this format, so I can't wait to get to locals on every week now. I'm gonna try go to like a Heart of the Underdog as well, which I don't know if you guys have that. Probably
No.
not, Josh,
Yeah,
yet. But have you
I'm
had any
familiar.
of those?
The closest thing we do to Heart of the Underdog is our locals does a $30 night every like 6 months, where the combined cost of your deck has to be $30 in lowest rarity, and
How do they like police that, if at all? Is it? I assume it's just all trust.
Yeah, it's just kind of honor system. Honestly, like everyone is just like so excited to brew for it that why would they break the rules? But I wasn't able to make this most recent one, but I played the last one. I played Abyss Actor, and I got second to Invoked. They just Invoked.
What's your kind of attendance
Marissa,
like around where you live?
depends on the local. There's one.
Oh
not
wow,
too
we've
far
got
from
more
me
than
that-
one. These spoiled Americans,
Well,
dude. I swear to
That's
God.
crazy.
Uh, before you get too excited, I'm talking about locals that are like an hour drive away.
Oh,
Uh,
that's like that's like a 2-minute walk in European timescales.
an hour drive?
Yeah, like you guys always talk about like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go on like a road trip, and it's like 8 hours, and it's like, yeah, it's just like a weekend road trip. Like that's like
Yeah,
7
exactly.
countries in EU.
Yeah, but one of them gets like, I would say probably like 45 to 50. That one is like outsized, and then the one that
That's
I go to
huge.
frequently because it's close to my house usually gets between like, I would say 15 and 20.
But
And
for like regular Yu-Gi-Oh, or also for like the
the
$30
regular
thing?
Yu-Gi-Oh, the alt
Okay,
format
okay.
people will come out for. We got like 30 for that one just because it
Okay.
was like an event.
That sounds cool.
It it is cool. I'm having the problem right now just because lead dropped and there's so much cool shit in lead. Where like, did we say shit by the way? Sorry, I'll redo that. If
Oh no, it's fine.
But there's so much cool stuff in lead that I have this problem that I'm sure you're all familiar with, where there's only one local I go to a week, but there is more than one deck that I build a week, and so I'm like, did I just buy and build and test this deck to never bring it to locals? Like what?
Yep.
I don't really have a slot for it. I'm right now I'm staring at the Supreme King Gate Melodious deck, and I'm like, when the fuck am I gonna play this? It's not. I don't have
What's
a
the
whole
Supreme Gate
organized.
version? Is it just like the pendulum, like new magician stuff with Melodious?
Yeah, well, it's just Ostinato is the most broken card ever printed,
Yeah.
and the concept is it gets you to beyond the pendulum super early, so you can always have the like Supreme King Gate Astrograph stuff, and then you just do pendulum stuff. It's like because you have so many one cards in it, you don't have to do that thing the pendulum decks do where they play like 37 pendulum cards and then 3 like evenly matched and call it a day. So it plays like 15 non-engine. You get to play like Ash, Droll, Baylor, and stuff, and I really like it. I've been having a blast.
Have you guys looked at like this new card per se, like the Melodious stuff? Like, because I feel like this is getting very like standard in some way. Like in Snake Eye, it's
Oh yeah, for
Appaloosa
sure.
plus Ash, and it's just a thing you can throw into any deck. Like that's like really ridiculous.
It's something that I like. I don't even know if we talked about it during during the last
We
podcast.
touched on it a little bit, yeah.
But because it was like one of the few things, like I had a lot of stuff on my radar for Legacy of Destruction. Those cards, to the extent that they're seeing play and success right now, were not on my radar to that extent. So like literally, the first time I actually took a more in depth look at them was after YCS Rio, because I didn't realize how good it was. I was like, okay, sure, they made the deck like somewhat of a thing now, but I haven't actually bothered like looking at them. But now it just like, that I've like taken a deeper look. They give me, I don't know if it's just me, but they give me major Super Heavy Samurai vibes.
Oh,
Yeah,
like where people would
100%.
splash Wakaushi.
Because it's just like you can play it as a pure deck, but you can also just splash it into other decks where if you draw Ostinato or that one new Pendulum normal summon, you can just create a lot of card advantage. Like, it's just, why is it full Snake Eye combo, Ostinato? Like, can someone explain that? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like when you could play Super Heavy Samurai pure, or you could also play Vakaushi in every single deck to make a rank 4 before you start normal summoning even, right?
Yeah, no, lead is just like that kind of set though. There's so many cards in it that I was like, yeah, that'll maybe show up on like YouTube, and then it turns out it's like, no, this is like an integral part of like 3-4 strategies now. I've been really impressed with it. I've been really impressed with the Melodious stuff. I'll be
Yeah.
honest. I think it's really sick.
Was the generic quick play spell leader, right? The Telronis, Metalronis, what are the
Metaltronus, yes.
Metaltronius or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
yeah.
I've already seen that
People are
topping,
trying it out.
which is interesting.
Yeah, I brought it up during the podcast. I like it a lot. It's a good card.
Yeah. But I think the thing with the Melodious engine, it goes back to a lot of what we talked about in the Extra Deck podcast, which is generic 2 level 4s, make an exceed that gets you generic Pyro, and then like it just interconnects to like all these different engines and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like that's kind of toxic, especially like you can be like really ignorant, you can like search flag search Protoss and stuff like that. Like that's ridiculous.
It
Have you
unites.
seen that's what they're
Yep.
Yeah, that's what they're doing in what? Voiceless Voice, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they do in Voiceless Voice with it, but I think it unites a lot of small issues into like a rather big one. It's one card combos all over again, and it's also weirdly placed restrictions for an archetype all over again. Because like First Movement Solo, which is a card from 2014, locks you into Melodious, which is like good, right? But then Ostinato, which is a card from 2019, which is way more broken than First Movement Solo, just doesn't, which is
Yeah.
weird. I'm like, okay, we were at that point in 2014 already where we're like, okay, we're giving Melodious good cards, but we're locking them to Melodious. And I'm be honest with you, I have no issue with the pure Melodious deck. The interactions that deck puts up seem cool to me, and I'd have no issue with that deck having a broken Branded Fusion like card, like completely fine. The fact that Snake Eyes uses it to outplay hand traps and summon like a Banshee before normal summoning and an Appaloosa, that I'm not fine with.
It's
I
like you
think
can do what you want. Like that's the crazy thing about that. We'll see how like it actually develops, but yeah, I just generic like build a board stuff like this is really bad. Apollos, I'm telling you, that's the third horseman that needs to go. Go ahead, Joseph. Sorry.
she will go sometime.
I'm just noticing that the topic of the podcast was meant to be why we like Yu-Gi-Oh, and we're here discussing recent events and criticizing stuff about the.
This is the warm up. This is the
Melodious
warm up.
I was
Okay, that's the
gonna go
warm-up.
to bat
Okay,
for
okay.
Ostinato. I think every deck should get Branded Fusion. I think it's really sick. I really don't like that Infernal Flame Banshee though. I think it seems really irresponsible to like uh print that card and then unban Corridor and what's his name, Protoss, and be like, okay, here's 2 or 3 fun little avenues you can use to stop the game immediately.
I mean, I feel like we're past the point of worrying about Protoss and Colossus, though, aren't we?
Yeah.
Are we still
I
coping
don't-
on the fact that those cards are relevant?
I think they are. I think you could side Protoss for going first, and if you have like 2 level 4 bodies, you can just search Protoss. Like I feel like that is like a respectable thing you can do.
I'm trying to who plays it? It's like I know Voiceless Voice can play it with Melodious.
Lightsworn probably definitely sides Protoss.
Okay, but they can have whatever they can have whatever they want. Yeah, they could. I the tier decks do, but tier always just wins if you don't stop them.
Hey, how you feeling
Well-
about the third Mali, Joseph? Is that a tier card or is it a hero card? What do you think?
Wow, it is really neither. It's cool that it's cool that they gave this card to 2 incredibly like good decks, and it is not going to be the difference maker.
Mm.
There's like
Is it gonna stay at 3 this
one-
time? You think?
I hope so. There's a hero combo it smooths out, and like tier, it's just like wow, infinite material. But I don't know. It seems fine.
It could stay this time. I feel like.
How do you feel about it? It's a 6, I guess, is like the scary part. How do you guys feel about the lifespan of Beatrice as the Fiendsmith stuff comes out?
Well, that deck's been popping off in OCG, hasn't it?
Yeah, but they play it
Yeah.
in Snake Eyes as well.
Why not?
So, is Snake Eye gonna be like the because you remember like tier limit over like the last year in OCG got like nerfed like literally like 5 times, and people were still just creating like absolute piles of decks that just were still running tier. Maybe we're gonna have that with Snake Eye now, right? Like they're just absolutely like ridiculous different builds after every single ban list to fix the issues, and apparently Fiendsmith is one of the ways that you can splash it in.
Have they even?
Well, the hits of the Snake Eye are like semi-limit Ash. Like
yeah,
you
they
don't
haven't
have to
even
make
hit
up
it yet.
for
It's
much.
not like tier where the deck just seemed
Not yet,
unkillable
yeah.
and it like survived so many hits, and you're like, how is it still alive? But Snake Eyes just like that you saw the ban list and you're like, well, still the best.
The sad part about Snake Eye is like it does have the ability to like play through answers and stuff, and it is adaptable, and it has a lot of tools at its disposal, but it's just not tier limit. You play it and you're like, damn, this shit is not tier limit.
Yeah, that's how I feel without Kit Colossus and TCG. It's like night and day with and without Kit.
I don't know. I really hate Master Duel tier. I really can't stand it. It's like I just look at every opener and I'm like, something's gonna have to happen here.
But that's what it is. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Master Duel
I don't know.
tier is like consistent. TCG tier is like more explosive, right? I feel that third
Yeah.
fusion matters so much.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's circle back on topic here. I love Yu-Gi-Oh! Bat Chest. I think me and Josh have shared a decent amount of our beginnings of the game, but for anyone who is uninitiated with the lore of the Mono Blue Tron, where did you first like start out with this game, and what are some of your fond, nostalgic memories of how you started Yu-Gi-Oh?
I started in '02. You know, when we got it here in America. Uh, and I probably, I guess I would say my throughout my childhood, there was a kid who lived next to us, and he had a scent about him. Um, you know, in many ways, this was my first encounter with the core Yu-Gi-Oh demo, but he smelled not great, so we couldn't
Oh,
play.
like a physical scent? Okay, I thought you were being metaphorical. All right, okay.
No, he smelled. It was kind of like we would say he smelled kind of like goat cheese, which is like not a super unpleasant scent, but it's like, you know, you can notice it. And but he would come over, and we couldn't play inside because then the house would smell like him for like a couple of days. So we would play out on our porch, and one thing that we would constantly play, we'd set up like the rustiest, shittiest card table of all time, and we would play Yu-Gi-Oh. We both just had Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I remember we played, I mean, probably thousands of hours of Yu-Gi-Oh. It was just a ton of fun. And I think my favorite thing that ever happened was I was blasting people with Chaos Sork. We were just playing with whatever we had, right? But for some reason, I had Chaos Sork. I had a couple of them. And one day, my brother was like, "You are always beating our ass with that card." He was like, and the other kid was like, "I bet it's on the ban list." And the concept of the ban list had just happened. And I was like, there's no fucking way this card, like, in the context of what's good in Yu-Gi-Oh, there's no way this card is up there. And it was the only list where Sork was semied. And they showed me this. And I was like, okay, you were right, you got me. And so I had to make changes to not disrupt the playgroup.
Did you know, like you personally,
yeah.
that it was on a list?
What?
Did you personally know? You didn't know, right? That there was a bounce,
No,
right?
not until I looked it up. Yeah.
Okay, I have
I
two
just
questions.
assumed
So we caught you there.
I have two questions. The first thing is, what was the reason you told him you had to play outside?
Because he stunk.
Well, yeah, kids.
No, but
what
like
I
you
like
can't
about
tell him
kids is
that,
they're
can you?
blunt. No,
That's
I
a good
did.
point.
I was like, sorry, man, you smell.
You told him?
Well, it's not like he didn't know. You know, like
What was his response? Like, oh yeah,
was
no,
like,
you're right.
"That's
I do
fine."
stink. Let's go outside.
Yeah, I don't know. We were literally like 7-year-olds. Like 7-year-olds say to each other, they're like, "You're ugly," and the other 7-year-old is like, "Oh, that's right." Like, they're just like stuff just bounces off them. They're like, "That's a good point. Let's ideate on that."
Okay.
Okay, my second question is, if anyone talks about goat format, do you
No,
think
it was
about
goat cheese.
Yeah, but is it, if anyone mentions goat format to you, is that do you think 2005 or do you think 2003 playing with the goat cheese kid?
Uh, I I think 2005. Goat kind of coincides with when I started. I don't want to say like taking the game seriously, because again, I was 11, but it was like I remember
Pre-puberty Joseph, like, yep, let's do some. Let's run the hypergeometric calculator on this one.
Oh, if you think I'm annoying now, no. We showed up to locals. I think maybe like a month or two after the post goat ban list, right? And our locals was like there wasn't like a tournament. It was just like everyone was just kind of chilling and playing pickup games against each other. Um, and I remember my brother and I sat down and we were like super nervous, so we just started playing some games against each other. And this like 31-year-old guy, which the nerds looked different in the early aughts. Like now nerds just look like us and they wear like, you know, they wear baseball caps that say epic on them and stuff. And um but I remember that
He's speaking for himself right now, by the way. Just saying, like, I do
He's
not
the
have
only one
a
with a
baseball
baseball
cap that
cap.
says epic.
Um,
I will self-report
there
really
was a-
quick. I have a baseball cap that says "You died," like from Dark Souls. That one's a bit that one cringes me out sometimes.
Awesome.
Sorry, go on.
But we were just jamming games, and this like 30-year-old guy with like greasy curly hair. How's your hair greasy and curly? And he had like the mustache that now we would call a pedophile mustache, but then it was just a mustache. He came over and he was like, "You guys know none of these cards are legal, right?" And I was like,
Actually.
"What are you talking about? Pot of greed, baby." And so he and another patron of the local, who, if you guys are familiar in chat with the Westboro Baptist Church, the people
Oh.
who they protest gays all the time, he was a member of that church. Those two sat down and helped us fix decks, and we walked out of there with decent decks for the format, and it was very fun.
And a new philosophy on gay people, I assume.
Nah, I mean, none of the kids believed that shit. It was like, we were like, "Are you part of the church?" And they were like, "Yeah, but what are we gonna do about it?"
To be fair, don't those people not play Yu-Gi-Oh because it's demonic and stuff? I thought that was
Oh no,
a whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Summoning
Maybe
monsters
some
and
of them
shit.
do.
I thought that was like a Catholic Moms Against Yu-Gi-Oh, or so. That's a big Facebook page I run, so that I know of.
I run. Dude, that's the funniest self-report.
You're gonna
Catholic
do a run
Moms
at some point?
Against Yu-Gi-Oh. That's a Facebook page that I run.
God.
I wonder, do you have people following it unironically who are like, "Oh God, I hope I get some more guidance"?
Well, I thought it was a joke because some of the stuff they would post would be ridiculous, those old TikToks and, well, I guess what would they even be called? Just videos, I suppose. Sorry, my brain is 2024. They would show
pictures.
Look,
TikTok yet?
See, you've got this Monster Energy drink, right? See this? This is the number 6 in Hebrew.
Oh, I love that video.
And then 666 Monster Energy drink is the devil, right? For example, right? That's they would post unironically that stuff, and I would be like, oh,
no,
this
that
is just
has lived
a satire page.
I remember, yeah, like you're saying, in 2013, people would post that video as a cringe, insane lady who's clearly her brain's been cooked, talking about nonsense. And then in 2019, it circulated again, and everyone was like, "Damn, she's really talking some sense. I got to be honest, she's making good points here." It's just a good little barometer for how we as a society have gotten much worse. Things are not going well.
I don't think I've ever experienced any of that stuff with Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid. I just remember it was always a cost thing, realistically. Growing up fairly broke was yeah, you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh because we can't afford it. So
yeah, I remember we didn't have a lot of money growing up, which is weird for a Rothschild, I guess, but I remember saving up for 3 weeks so that I could purchase a copy of the rare Yu-Gi-Oh card Silva Overlord of Dark World from MikeLoda.com. It was a $5.99 rare, and it took me a month to save up the money for it. And I was like, I'm gonna fuck up the playground. I'm gonna do it. And it wasn't the difference maker.
one copy of Silva.
I didn't do it. I was like, I want to play Dark World, and then I found out gold was a $12 card, and I was like, I want to play Row Control. I was playing the Cheerful Coffin, and I was like, this is just gonna have to work.
Fantastic. Yeah, that period in time was just great, right? Because you had those flaming shirts, you had the Sum 41 hoodies, that kind of stuff like that. And what shoes were we wearing? Different skate brands and stuff. I saw this random fucking tidbit the other night, and it was oh, do you remember Osiris D3s and DC shoes? That was the shit we were rocking, and just going to locals, going to school, and playing in the playground. It was a different time,
Mm-hmm.
What was it like in Germany, Josh, as a kid?
The times or playing Yu-Gi-Oh at that time?
Well, I'm not asking for the political landscape of West Germany in 2002, but I'm talking about Yu-Gi-Oh. Yes.
All these stories
There's
that
no
you
way
guys
West
were saying,
Germany in 2002.
I realized you guys didn't have one part that we had as kids, which was the incredible power of English cards when none of us spoke English. Which
that's
I guess something you guys never had to experience. I mean, all the Germans in chat or any other non-native English speakers are gonna know. There's a bunch of people who had English cards for some reason, and they would just make up the effect, and it would do whatever they wanted to do, and no one could prove them wrong because none of us spoke English because we were 5.
Yeah.
So
Jinzo does just say special summon from deck.
It was just a whole meta. It would You know, because the only thing that was on the cards that was not text was like the numbers, right? And so it was like some random card that said the number 2000 on it because it was like, I don't know, pay 2000 life points, and they would just say, yeah, like it lets my monster gain 2000 attack or some shit whenever they needed it. And it was like there was a whole meta behind that.
Dan Keto in Germany just does like anything 1000 related, right?
Do not ask a 2000s kid what a restriction is, because they don't know. They will just summon anything at any point.
Yeah. Let's draw 1000 cards or some shit. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think of like some fond memories of mine specifically, and some dumb stuff that we used to do. Because me and my friend who lived around the corner from me, we used to just play like so much Yu-Gi-Oh! Like every day for like an entire summer. And I just remember just running like 4 copies of Monster Reborn in my deck because I realized quite early,
dog.
like,
Why wouldn't you?
That's pretty good. Like, this card just lets you special guy from the graveyard. I should try play as many of those as possible. But then it was offset by my deck building, which was, you know, let's play a 67 card pile of Blue Eyes and Dark Magicians, etc. So, yeah. Well, I mean, you laughed way too into that, Josh. You liked that self-deprecation about my deck building too much there, buddy.
What do you mean?
Yeah, what changed?
What changed?
Oh, that's what you mean. See, I kept that to myself for a good reason. Now you just brought it out. I didn't say anything.
Yeah. I was playing like awful, terrible cards, no synergy, and like a 60 card pile last weekend when I brought BA for the 45th time.
It really is a BA deck.
Let's talk about...
Go on.
Let me get one more story in. I told this on stream yesterday, but I think I did a bad job, so I'm gonna run it back. I remember I had a friend. Did you guys do the thing in like high school where you didn't play Yu-Gi-Oh because you were trying to get pussy?
No, I
wouldn't phrase it like that, but I always played. But there was a period. There was a period where I didn't tell people about it that much.
Yeah. So yeah. I did that as well. I think like it's crazy. I don't know. When you grow up, it's like you're a kid, you play Yu-Gi-Oh, and then when you get to college, no one gives a fuck like what you do, you know. Like there was that high school sweet spot where you did have to kind of be closeted about playing Yu-Gi-Oh, or else people would think you were a nerd, which they wouldn't otherwise, I guess. And I remember I had started dating this girl, and about a week into dating, I was sitting at like a lunch table, me and this girl opposite my friend who also played Yu-Gi-Oh, and his new girlfriend. And the two girlfriends talked to each other, and my new girlfriend was like, yeah, no, I just got out of another relationship about a month ago. Get this, the guy played Yu-Gi-Oh. Isn't that like loser shit? Like me and my friend, we do the like lock-in eyes, or like, yeah. That's like caught. It's like pathetic. That's like, wow, that's unbelievable. And we're gassing it. We're like, yeah, like what is he, like a child? That's ridiculous. And so we navigate our way through this conversation, and at the end of the week, I roll up to locals, and I just like walk into the room, and there is my fucking friend who is sitting across from me doing wind-up combos, and he was just like, yeah, well, what are you gonna do? You know, it is what it is.
I mean, he was playing wind up, so that's not a lie. What a fucking loser.
Yeah.
I think like for me, like weirdly, my shame growing up was World of Warcraft. Actually, if people knew that you were playing WoW, like you were a turbo nerd, you know, an MMORPG. That was yeah. Because for me personally, I played Yu-Gi-Oh when I was a kid, and then there was like this big gap. And then I started again in Dragon Ruler format, which is a great return to Yu-Gi-Oh, by the way, just saying.
Dragon Ruler? Yeah.
Yeah. Which is funny, because like that's like when I start playing, and then like Josh is already like attending Worlds by that point.
Yeah, it's like, we're like, wow, these new cards have a lot of text on them. I'm going to play Evil Swarm Heliotrope.
Which makes Ophion, which could easily defeat a Dragon Ruler deck, just saying.
I was playing Dark World in that format. I was like, the 3 structure deck, you got it. That's my price range, baby.
Let's talk about the social aspect, because I think this is probably like just the best thing. I don't know how you guys are, but like For better or for worse, I just kind of like my friendship group has like slowly just been like completely replaced with like Yu-Gi-Oh players over the last 10 years. So in good ways, you know, like the game has given me like and opened up so many different circles of friends, and you guys especially, you know, for example, I consider you guys like friends outside of just sharing spaces on the Twitch platform and stuff. And I think that's really cool, just how many different backgrounds and different like types of people as well, because it's really crazy like the different archetypes of humans that play this game. You know, you have like your typical turbo nerd, and then you'll have like a guy who's like got a master's in like chemistry or something like that. Just so many different wide varied interests. And I think it's weird in a good way, like just the type of different people that are brought together just because they want to play a card game. You know, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like the best part for me has always been going to a YCS and just hanging out with the bros, like before, well, on the Friday night or on the Sunday night. Go on, Josh.
I have this thing as well where I have a lot of friendships from this game where it feels like it's very very non-complicated friendships. It's just like it's super normal for me to have a bunch of people in my life that I don't see them sometimes for weeks or months because they just live in another country and I just don't get to, interact with them on a very daily basis. But then when there's another event happening, it's just there's so many people that I haven't seen in such a long time, but I'm just like genuinely happy to meet up with them again, update each other on what's been going on, and it's just like super normal. It's none of like this like, hey, why didn't you message for the last couple of weeks, or why didn't we, like no one like bats an eye at that. Like it's completely normal for us to just like part ways after an event, but then like we meet up again, and it's like super cool to meet a lot of different people across like people that I've known since like at this point 20 years or something, and it's very very special to me.
That's one of the
Whenever I
hardest
go
things
to an
about
event.
civilian friendships is like there's this expectation to
Exact.
like,
That's the word. Yeah, expectations. Yeah, because I'm not very good at that. I'll let you know. Like I'm and sometimes I just like don't I forget to answer stuff or whatever. It's kind of like I'm not the greatest at that stuff. But like with these kind of relationships, like no one really it's normal. Like it's not expected, which is cool.
I don't know how you feel, Joseph, but I think it's like such a expected normal thing as you go into your late 20s and 30s. Like as an adult, like friendships really take a backseat to life. There's always like the whole joke about like getting an adult friendship group to meet is like trying to spreadsheet out 7 different schedules and stuff like that to actually hang out together.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think that's just like a really difficult thing as you progress into adulthood. So not necessarily something for Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh makes the schedule for you, dude. Like you have friends at
You got
locals.
locals.
You meet up at locals.
Got a YCS in 4 months, or 4 years if you're European.
Or never.
4 years. I don't know. See any of them. Maybe TBA is like a European nation, right?
Yeah.
No. I would agree with all that. I think that I don't know. It's also been like a fun thing to do with friends. I'm like thinking about my immediate friend group, and even like the people who don't play Yu-Gi-Oh, like they have to play Yu-Gi-Oh now. We all. It's just like it is a really good. I feel like I'm glad we led talking about kind of like playing Yu-Gi-Oh in childhood, because it feels like a lot of the time to hang out with people as an adult, you need some sort of like prerequisite, where like you have to be doing something together, like to justify hanging out. So
Mhm.
Yu-Gi-Oh is like a really great vehicle for that. You get to be like, oh man, let's test, and then you get to chill and you get to have fun, and like, people don't have play dates anymore. What happened?
There was a time where the last possible instance of it happening was there was a day where someone came into your house or like came up to your house, knocked on the door and said, "Can X come out to play?" There was a day that happened for the last time. That doesn't happen anymore.
That's what you think.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come visit you and I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna knock on your door.
Ask my wife, like,
Can Farfa come out to play?
can you come test with me? Yeah, no, but for real, I can't emphasize enough just how much I enjoy the YCS experience from a social point. It really is just so cool, like meeting people that you haven't seen in months, like in the hotel lobby or crossing paths, like in between rounds, and literally just being like catching up, like again, without that expectation of like, you know, why aren't we regularly speaking? It's just a case of, hey, here you are, we're in the same place. What's been new with you, et cetera, et cetera. It's really cool. Like that's my favorite part is like the YCS thing.
I will say I don't think that's exclusive to Yu-Gi-Oh! I think that is just something that a lot of hobbies can do, especially card games. Like that is something
Yeah.
I'm noticing. I'm noticing the same patterns, let's say, when I'm observing other people, like for example, like Magic players or Pokemon players that to the local at the locals where I go to now. A lot of the stuff is it feels like it almost feels interchangeable. Like it almost feels like all of this discussion that's constantly happening of like which card game is the best is like completely irrelevant because at the end of the day, it's just card games are to me a very wonderful hobby. No matter which one you choose, let's just pick the one that you like the most, and whatever you decide on, I think you're gonna have a great time with it. And it just happens that for me that was Yu-Gi-Oh very early on, but I think that is just something I value about this type of hobby in general.
Do you think we've had? I mean, we definitely have, but what do you think are some of the differences we've experienced as content creators compared to like the average Yu-Gi-Oh player? And how do you think you, Josh, specifically? Because I think like me and MBT kind of always sort of made content for the most part. Like, whereas you like were very much a player. You were known as a player, and then you became a content creator. Like, how did that social aspect of that whole thing adjust and change for you over the last like year?
I mean, it definitely changes the amount of, let's say, the experience at a tournament is very, very different when you're a content creator as opposed to when you're just there as like a private person. Because even like, even before when like people would know who I was most of the time, they wouldn't like the amount of people that came up to me and like want the card signed or want the playmat signed or want to take a photo is like that happened occasionally because I've won like a YCS or two at the time.
Get a
But
load of
like
this guy.
the amount of people that want to do that now is like it's gone through the roof pretty much, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's like it has a very it makes me very very happy whenever that happens. It's like it's a different experience, right? Like it can be stressful at times, but at the end of the day, I'm very thankful for all the people that want to do that, right? And have the mathmech circular signed for the 10,000th time or whatever. But
Next time
it's
someone comes to you with a circular or loci, you should be like, you know what? This gets funnier every time.
yeah. No, but it's like it's something that I've thought about this in the past, and it's like I think if this was my life all the time, I think it'd probably be too stressful for someone who I consider myself an introverted person. And it's like if this was like a daily thing for me, it'd be I probably wouldn't like it. But the fact that it's like it happens like once every other month, and at this point, I mean, currently it's been like months since it's happened pretty much, but like you know what I mean. Normally it happens like a couple times a year for like a weekend, and then I can kind of go back to a normal life and not have it for a while, and then it feels like it's well balanced as opposed to like being an actual celebrity, you know. Um, but yeah.
My fondest memory was YCS London 2019. I think it was 19. And it was just this like actual just horde of children gathered around Triff, just like Pokemon, just like buzzwording like pen best deck, Electrovite, pen best deck. And like he was just sitting there taking pictures with them and stuff and signing their cards. It was just my favorite memory. It was so funny.
That is cute. That was a gathering of the oldest Triff viewers.
That's the most mature ones, yeah.
Those were the only ones that were allowed to come out.
Yeah.
Anything to add to this, Joseph?
What's up?
Anything
I
to...
want to add that Farfa was one of the childs, basically. By the way.
True,
Like,
yeah.
he was in the crowd, in the middle, right there.
Oh, you know, you guys call me Dwarfa, but I was still like towering over Triff. Just saying.
Dwarfa? That's so good. I'm writing that down real quick.
Yeah. So, anything else to add to our social aspect here, Joseph? Your
No, yeah,
your
I would agree with
experiences.
Josh in that it is a really really different experience when you're like playing versus. I mean, every event I've gone to since like since COVID is just like so different. They feel so much bigger. Like the attendance keeps increasing, of course, and like going as a content creator is just like, yeah, you basically have no downtime. It's like more a meet and greet than like an event, which
Mhm.
which honestly is nice. Like I like to like meme about it, but it is nice to be like, I like seeing people who will reference the 4 or 5 memes. I will write Bussy on a card all day, and uh, it is very enjoyable to see there is still life in this game because the way we talk about it sometimes it feels like, oh man, Yu-Gi-Oh's on its last legs, and then you go to an event and it's like, nah, we're fine.
Maybe in America, but we don't get a lot of those over here. Sorry, I had to
Hey,
throw
you
that one
would have
again
been an opportunity to do that.
in. Next subtopic I got here is like the themes and the lore of like the archetype designs and stuff. And I wanted to bring this subject up because I think like this is one of the coolest aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh. I mean, card games in general I think are really awesome because of their the attachment that people develop and the love that people have for certain decks and archetypes. Sometimes that alone is enough to keep people playing. They just specifically really like a certain deck, a certain mechanic and stuff, and people really resonate with like the theme of a specific archetype and stuff like that. I mean, Josh, I feel like you're maybe a little different. I mean, you're kind of like, I suppose, the Paleo Frog guy to an extent, but as a competitive player, you're kind of always just playing like the best deck.
Yeah, the competitive Josh doesn't care about this kind of stuff pretty much, but I have a side to me that really still is that way. Like even though when I go to a really big tournament, I feel kind of forced to play the most competitive stuff, but I have this side to me as well. Like I mean, there's a reason why I've brought Paleo to locals and why I've been playing Paleo on Master Duel for like days and all that kind of stuff. Like and that is something that I really really enjoy as well. Like I enjoy both of those things. Like when I say I feel forced to play a competitive deck or whatever, maybe that sounds like I don't enjoy it as much, but that's usually not true. Most of the time, I really enjoy the competitive, like the try-harding aspect as well. Uh, and but I really enjoy the opportunity whenever I can to play the stuff that I really where I really enjoy the play style of the deck, essentially, right? Because that's not a guarantee when you're try-harding.
Yeah. What's the deal with heroes? Like, 'cause I actually don't know what the deep lore is there. Like, why is that? Is it just an anime thing, or like, what's the hero attachment for?
You ready? It has nothing to do with any anime. I thought GX was kind of cringe. I do not like. I'm not like a big superheroes guy these days.
Okay, hold.
I'm gonna say this sentence and it's gonna make me sound like a psychopath. I just like Dark Law.
What?
It is I just like the way the card is.
Like the
The
effect?
card is yes. The effect is good. It is just such a perfect card from from stem to stern, and
Dude,
I will find any excuse to play it and its ilk.
no, that's fair enough. I feel like anyone has that one floodgate that they just like so much that they can like
Floodgate,
excuse it.
you can attack it. Yeah, that's fair.
You can attack it. Oh, okay.
Mine is like Light and Darkness Dragon. Like if any like even
Oh
now
yeah.
when people play like Light and Darkness Dragon and it's clearly meant to like be a stun deck and whatever, I can just can't help but think Light and Darkness Dragon is so cool.
Oh, have you seen the new Light and Darkness dragons?
Yeah,
The ones that
yeah.
just are coming out.
I think it's the fusion is like basically lad, right? It's kind of nuts.
Yeah, it's like they look very fun. I hope that they are good.
You have a favorite floodgate, Josh?
I mean, you probably Light and Darkness Dragon actually.
I mean, lad's not really a floodgate.
I mean, okay, well then,
Unironically,
what,
mine's is anti-spell. Like, I don't
what
know
is like
why.
what
What's
classifies
wrong
as a
with you?
floodgate?
Hold up. Expand on that.
So,
Darklaw is like a guy. He's like cool. You're talking about a pot with like the
Okay, yeah,
smile on it.
there's no excuse for
I
that.
don't know why, but I've always just like loved anti-spell. And I think
Oh,
it's
you don't
because
know
like
why.
because I love like pairing it with other stuff, you know, like end phase, like Blackout and Fire Lake and stuff. I've always loved doing that. I don't know why, like pulling off these like silly
I
combos.
love doing my line and then flipping anti-spell. I
Yeah,
keep winning.
yeah.
It's
Oh
great.
no, listen, man, we're talking about favorite floodgates. There's no logic here, but I just
Okay, what
it's
classifies
always
as a
been-
floodgate? Is anything that applies a lingering condition on your opponent that they can't do a certain thing a floodgate?
Yeah, I suppose something like that, lingering or continuous.
Okay, dupe frog is my answer.
That's not a floodgate.
I asked you for this. You specified. I
a battle
intentionally
floodgate.
asked beforehand before I said it, and you said yes.
Judge, Dupe Rogue is a floodgate, Your Honor.
If you have 2 dupe frogs, you can't attack the Dark Law. It even
floodgate.
insulates your other floodgates.
Based opinion, I guess. Joseph, you probably know a lot about this, but I think one of the coolest things about Magic is like the colors very specifically have like themes attached to them. Like from what I understand, like black is like the graveyard deck and stuff like that. You know, Yu-Gi-Oh kind of like does that pretty well, I think, to some extent. But you know, what's your experience and how do you comparatively feel that sort of changes like between other games and stuff?
Oh, Farfa, here we go again, talking about Magic the Gathering. Oh,
Infamous
man.
Magic lover, yeah, that's me.
Oh, it's every comparison. No, so with Magic, I think one of the reasons I prefer Yu-Gi-Oh is that for like a decade, Magic was like every set that released was about like the most important thing that ever happened. And it was just like exhausting watching it take itself so seriously. And these days it's like pivoted back in the other direction, and now it's like, what if all your favorite characters were playing dress up? And I don't like either of those. I like how Yu-Gi-Oh strikes a nice balance between like like silly little archetypes and like, big serious guys. Um but yeah, I think one of Magic's biggest strengths over Yu-Gi-Oh is the color pie. I think the fact that you can kind of intuit what your opponent is going to do, even though you don't know anything about the individual cards that may compose their deck, is really good for players who are like trying out a new format or don't know a 40,000 card catalog off the top of their head. And I think that's something that Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of uniquely bad at. Like, like what the hell is a branded fusion, right? They will probably fusion summon. Can you figure out that you're going to get gimmick puppet locked from that? Probably not. Um, I wish that there were more ways that you could just figure out what's going on in Yu-Gi-Oh. There's a lot of like hidden information that means you're just going to take an L to a deck the first time you see it.
Yeah, we don't have this sort of identity. I mean, archetypes have an identity, but you can't defer it from just seeing the archetype, right? It's like when you see a
Mm.
blue magic deck, like, okay, that's probably going to be able to counter some of my stuff. Whereas, like, I don't know, a green deck probably can't do that, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so it's like something that you don't get that from Yu-Gi-Oh.
I wonder if that's
Um,
something the game is missing, right? Because imagine like fire was always sort of kind of, let's say for example, in Yu-Gi-Oh, fire would generally have like burn effects. Dark would have a bunch of graveyard effects. Like, I wonder if that's like a good or bad thing that Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have this theme so attached to like attributes or typings.
it'd be interesting. It's an interesting thought experiment, even though it's like obviously not something they could ever implement at this point, like 20 years in. But it's like at the same time, I feel like that is a concept that kind of has to go hand in hand with rotation
Yeah.
because it feels like, and to an extent, that doesn't even sound that good to me when it's like, yes, okay, the idea of preventing some hidden information to not be accessible is cool, but like doesn't it also mean that Magic has kind of been reinventing the same stuff for those colors in just slightly different ways from like format to format to format? Isn't it like kind of like, okay, we're gonna have to design like a new blue card, but it kind of has to stick to this identity. How do we really make it feel different? Like how is that a good thing when playing against blue kind of feels the same for like 20 years? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say the way that it's good is because playing against blue is really it,
I
it
mean, yeah,
does
but
it
then
does
take
feel
another
like
color, you know what I mean?
yeah. No, it does feel like almost every Yu-Gi-Oh archetype has a similar identity to the way like colors work, which
Yeah.
um for a new player is not remotely, you can't engage with it. But it also means that like there's a lot that's allowed to do a lot. Whereas, in Magic, they do push the envelope quite frequently, but like they're always going to have to design a new counter spell, and they always have to design new spot removal that's like kind
Yep.
of conditional for black, and they're always going to have to design like a big guy with large numbers on him for green.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, I think this kind of idea of like an identity in Yu-Gi-Oh has been experimented with a bit. Chat kind of mentioned how like psychics used to like be like the pay X to do something kind of archetype kind of theme, like it kind of worked sort of like as a typing thing. If you're gonna go like super earlier than that, probably a good thing that they completely scrapped this very quickly. But do you guys remember like the star sign of Yu-Gi-Oh cards from, like the old from the old video
Forbidden
games?
Memories.
Yeah. Like that.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I never played that game. I know how it works.
So it's I don't think anyone knows how it works. So there was like this weird mechanic back in like Duelist of the Roses, Forbidden Memories, like all of like the old school Yu-Gi-Oh games, where every monster had like a star sign, like Mars, Jupiter, Venus, and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I don't really I guess like in Forbidden Memories you could fuse different star signs together, like without
Here, I'm gonna-
poly. You got this one?
Up right now. Yeah. So these are called the Guardian Stars.
Yes.
And like Pokemon, it's like a type chart where like each star is strong against X and weak against Y. But it's not like fire is weak to water. It's like, oh, obviously like Mars beats Jupiter but loses to Neptune. Of course. We all know that Uranus loses to Saturn and beats Pluto.
So how did that
then,
apply
like-
practically? Would it be like a damage component? You would get like an extra 200 or something during the damage step or something? Like how did it work? There was a practical application other than
Chat is
like
saying
the
it's
contact
stat
fusion?
increases.
Yeah, apparently there
Yeah.
was like a bunch of stat increases. So obviously it wasn't like implemented very well, but what are you guys' thoughts on
No.
something like that?
Well, to me, it feels a lot more like Pokemon's Resistance. If you've ever played the Pokemon TCG, a lot of cards have like they have a weakness and resistance, where like the weaknesses they take twice damage, and the resistances they take like -30 or something. And those suck. I don't know too much about Pokemon TCG, but my emotions about those is they are awful. They like make some matchups feel unwinnable and others feel unlosable. Historically, and the best case scenario is that they don't matter. Like that the numbers are kajiggered in such a way that like it's not going to impact a game ever. Like if you just have a matchup or super disadvantaged. I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it's bad.
Yeah, I think like field advantages and stuff used to be a big part of like those old school games, which I think kind of maybe was like a leftover of why like field spells used to be able to destroy field spells, and then even that got scrapped in
Dude,
2014.
that one I kind of miss.
Really?
I think that makes sense as well. To only have like one field apply at the same time.
Because otherwise, like, what's the functional difference between a field spell and a continuous spell, right?
Yeah, there's not really one anymore.
Especially
I think
now
it
with
would be
like
cool.
field spells getting stronger, like being able to
Oh, yeah,
out
they're
a
so
field
crazy,
spell is like kind of important.
I thought
It's
that was
like-
like a cool like especially I mean the one format where I think of that where that really mattered was the ravine ruler format, and it was like a really cool part of the format. It was really integral to like protect your own ravine from your opponent's ravine. So sometimes you would just not activate it, like you would pop it with an ancient fairy, search another copy, and not play it, so that your opponent wouldn't get a free removal on it if they had their own dragon ravine. And at the same time, it would discourage your opponent from playing their Dragon Ravine because they knew you could put your own over it next turn, all that kind of stuff. I felt like conceptual, it made sense that the field was only affected by one field spell. And then in practice, I never really had an issue with it. Like, I mean, and I feel like ever since Mystic Mind format, people would agree that, you know, sometimes that would probably have been a very smooth solution to a card that otherwise was very hard to prepare for. When instead you could just have an archetype with a field spell and you wouldn't care.
These are the field spells are actually not to talk about Magic for the millionth time, but they're a holdover from World enchantments, which were like a really early. They're functionally Magic field spells, and they had the same rules apply to them. You can only have one, but they
So those don't
they
exist
print those
anymore?
They were like, no,
Oh, okay.
we're not doing that shit.
I've
This is
never heard of this, and I've tried Magic a couple times, and I've never heard of this.
No, there's only like 10 of them, and they're really old. It's just one of those things that they were trying, and they were like,
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about gameplay and deck building. Yu-Gi-Oh is, well, I suppose unique in that it's the fastest game. It's probably the most unique card game. Every other card game tends to have a resource system of some sorts derived from or just straight up copied from Magic. But Yu-Gi-Oh has, completely does away with that, and I suppose has some of the best aspects, and some of the worst aspects of not having that as well in some respects. So, keeping things positive, I suppose, like opening the floor here. What's your favorite aspects about the deck building and gameplay of Yu-Gi-Oh?
I think it's just the sheer amount of possibilities, right? And I've heard this, like, I think one of Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest quote unquote problems for newer players is also one of his biggest selling points, is that the amount of options you have, which often understandably feels overwhelming to people, is also the one that makes it feel the most rewarding and gives you the most freedom in what you're going to do. Because I've played a bunch of card games that had mana systems or something alike, and those kind of systems, they do kind of hold your hand throughout a game. Like when you draw an opening hand in Magic, you can only play out of those 7 cards. You can only play 1 or 2. The same goes for any other mana-based game. You look at your opening hand, and you are it's dictated by the amount of mana you have, what kind of card you can play. It makes it relatively easy. Those games have other skill sets that are obviously very, very important, like when you play your cards, the order you play your cards in. If you have the choice between multiples, which one do you pick? I'm not saying those games are easy in general, but just for that aspect alone, Yu-Gi-Oh is more complicated in the sense that you have a lot more options at the same time at the right of the start of the game, and it makes the games feel it's very rewarding to actually get through that, like be able to see through all of this information that you're given and make a choice based on it.
Yep. Joseph?
I do want to, I guess, push back a little bit on on the Magic comparison in terms of like, oh, every other game has a mana system and Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't. No, Yu-Gi-Oh did evolve as like a rip-off of Magic the Gathering, and I think they did do a good job early of like identifying a potential resource like would artificially slow the game down in just like the way normal summons worked. But the thing that I like about Yu-Gi-Oh is just how much it has deviated from that. And like how when designing new stuff, they're just like, no, like you just get to cheat every possible limit. It is really, for me, it's like my favorite stuff to do in Magic is like, oh, cheat how many cards you draw and how much mana things cost. And Yu-Gi-Oh, I think, taps into the same type of like, I guess, dopamine receptors that are just like, no, you get to do everything, man. You're gonna go all the way
Yeah.
off every game, and it feels good to be able to do the stuff that it allows you to. In recent years, what I've really liked about Yu-Gi-Oh is I feel like they've done a really, I hate to sing Konami's praises, but they've done a really good job of facilitating a type of gameplay. It feels like each individual card and each individual action can matter, even in a game that is like built around like combos. Like the um the amount that playing in certain ways and around certain things and like uh hiding information and stuff can still be a game determinative in a game where like you could execute a YouTube combo and get to the same end board as an opponent who was like playing carefully. It's cool. It's really good. I like that there are mechanisms for skill expression in a game that's this fast.
Yeah, that's fair. For me personally, like one of my favorite things about when I remember when I used to play a lot of Hearthstone was you would slow roll your way to like a turn 8 or 9, and then you would have like this big Exodia combo that you would do. And well, in Yu-Gi-Oh, you could do that turn 1. And it's a very weird paradox because we usually talk about how combo decks are probably generally quite bad for the game. But it is a paradox because I love it so much. I really do. I just enjoy like doing my turn 1 like crazy like Lightsworn Mill deck in 2016. I used to love playing that deck, just filling the grave. I love I used to absolutely love Emancipator, and it is a big paradox because it's really probably not good for the game, but I just enjoy doing that so much, and that's always been one of the biggest pull factors for me.
Yeah. I don't even think it's that paradox. I think it's as simple as
It is though,
this
because
whole
if they do it to me, I'm sitting there baby
no,
raging.
but that's the thing. That's not paradox though. It's like there's a lot of things that are really, really fun when you get to do them, but we obviously still criticize them when they happen to you, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and I mean that is kind of like the fundamental of like winning is fun and losing is not fun, and or like most of the time losing isn't fun. It still can be. You can still sometimes you lose a really like you can lose a really good game and maybe it still feels fun, but like the core concept is like um this whole thing like executing some crazy stuff and your opponent like you just stomp your opponent, they don't even feel like they had a chance, is like that's fun if you do it right. The only reason why we criticize it is that like it's more like I would value the the fact that my opponent can't ever do that to me more than me having that opportunity, right? It's like, but like overall, it's like a net neutral kind of thing. It's not even overall a negative. It's like one player has fun, the other one doesn't, which is very often the case in a lot of games. Very often when you are like play stomp someone in a game of FIFA and ask them how they feel afterwards about that game. Right? Do you have fun? You have 5-0 in FIFA or whatever? Like, no, probably not. But it's like,
Well,
it's
now the
yeah,
thing with that example is that you can play better than your opponent and not get 5-0'd. In
that's
Yu-Gi-Oh, you
yeah.
can. There's only so much you can do to play better against an Emancipator dude, and you don't have
Okay,
hand traps. You know what
let's
I mean?
use like Monopoly then as an example or whatever.
Oh, now we've got a Now we've got a parable for society and capitalism. Okay, Joseph, tell us about that. No, let's not go there.
You went back real fast on that.
You were like, "Hey, Joseph, start." You know what? Actually, that folks, what is to be done? I'm constantly asking this.
Yeah. What do we think about deck building wise for
Mm,
positives of Yu-Gi-Oh?
um,
yeah, it's weird.
what is weird?
Yeah, I feel like deck building in Yu-Gi-Oh is obviously important, right? It's like you got to build a good deck, you know. But,
It's so different from other games, right? Because I've noticed, like, when I try to play like Magic and Hearthstone, and I would do deck build, and it's like, okay, well, I need a good balance of like low mana and high mana,
Mhm.
and I need to find like a good curve. But in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's like it's a totally different way you deck build, right?
To be fair, I
Yeah.
think you're just applying statistics in both cases, but in slightly different fashions, right? Like in those games, you're using statistics to do something like a curve, to make sure you have a good enough chance to draw the stuff you need early into the stuff that you want later and all that kind of stuff, right? Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, we kind of just like use statistics to determine, okay, how many cards do we need to be able to play the game early on? How many cards can we afford to play to prevent our opponent from doing certain things, right?
Best
Um,
part of deck building.
but I think
Um,
one thing that sets Yu-Gi-Oh apart from other card games when it comes to deck building is that it has virtually no restrictions on which cards you can put in a deck together, right? It's like every other card game has a restriction on which cards can go in a deck together, even if it's just a theoretical one. Like in Magic, you can theoretically do also every card in the same, but you are like dictated by the colors of your lands. Usually you won't put more than 2 or 3 different colors into one deck. Can't really do that practically, even though theoretically it's possible. But for the most part, in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can put any card into a deck together. Paired with the fact that we don't have a rotation means we have like infinite options when it comes to deck building. Whereas like in other card games, it's like, okay, well, I'm building a warrior deck, so I have the warrior and the neutral cards available, or I'm building I don't know, red green deck, so I have those cards available, and it's just like it cuts down the amount of options you have significantly.
What's some of the key
yeah.
differences for you, Joseph? Like when you deck build in Magic compared to Yu-Gi-Oh?
Well, for me, I think the skill of deck building is way diminished in Yu-Gi-Oh. I think Yu-Gi-Oh excels in other places, but I think like deck building for Yu-Gi-Oh is a much different thing than deck building for like a game like Magic. It's mostly because
I
There's a
feel
lot
like
of
I completely
statistics
agree
involved.
with you here, by the way, just for the record.
There's a lot of statistics involved relative to Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of trying to get a deck to consistently open a specific hand, right? Like, you spend a lot of time like massaging numbers on the stupid fucking calculator to hey, Chad, if you're new, calc is slang for calculator. But to open like some number of starters and cards that answer your opponent's answers, and cards that prevent your opponent from playing. And so, mostly what you're doing, I feel, is like playing a bunch of like engine considerations that like you have to get into over the course of the game. Like you don't necessarily want to open a card like I don't know, like Runic Fountain, maybe, but you can, and so like you have to decide how many you're playing of that, and then you're like, okay, I want to max out on the cards that like get me to my combo, I guess, and then I want to max out on enough non-engine that I can interact with my opponent, and I feel like a lot of the deviations in deck building are mostly just changes in like people deciding what specific cards they want to play to answer their opponent, how much they're willing to play, like in terms of the service of their linear combo and stuff like that. Um, and I think a lot of that is because the pool of cards that's available to you in Yu-Gi-Oh is your opener plus the cards that your opener gets to, with some exceptions. There are some decks that, of course, draw like a ton of cards and see a lot of them. But over the course of like a game of like Magic, for instance, you can just expect to draw one at a time off the top of your deck, like a quarter of your strategy. So a bunch of things that like sound stupid in Yu-Gi-Oh, like you want to see it sometimes, but not all the time. Um, do actually make sense in a game where like you have multiple turns and the opportunity cost of finding a bad card off the top of your deck isn't so bad that you might play a card with like diminished utility. So if you look at a bunch of Magic the Gathering decks, people are playing like tons of one ofs and two ofs, and it's like not only super defensible, it's like legitimately good. And figuring out what you want those cards to be, what ratios you want them at, is I think a lot more difficult than deck building in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think it's one of the reasons why like net decking in Magic is looked upon like a lot less favorably, whereas net decking in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like a prerequisite to playing a deck. Like you want to load up Master Duel, you go to like a video that has the deck printed out.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. That's I think it doesn't necessarily make it bad,
No,
but
no, for sure.
it's different. It's definitely different. I see that. Yeah, especially the one where maybe it used to be in a way where you would expect to play a bunch of turns back in the day, and it would be more. It was also more like acceptable, or like more like something that it was more normal back in the day to play cards like just like a random copy or a two of, because like
Mhm.
throughout a game of, I don't know, goat format or Edison, like you're more likely to see that card eventually. It's not something you need to open or not see at all, right? And the
Mhm.
that is definitely something with modern Yu-Gi-Oh where it has changed to an extent where the actual process that you go through most of the time is just, looking at your opening hands, right? Because you're trying to get your deck to do the same thing or similar to the same thing a lot of the times. But still, there's still, because of our huge card pool, there's still always like scenarios where you can find this like super old card that no one has thought of before, and that suddenly changes how things go in your deck completely or whatever. And that it's got different aspects, I would say, that I also enjoy, but I definitely understand that sort of like argument.
And I should say, in formats in Magic where like there is not a rotation, like frequently as cards become better, it does kind of return to Yu-Gi-Oh deck building principles where they're like, okay, you play four of this because it's so insane, you
Yeah.
play, so
I think for
it's a
me
lot of sweet
personally,
spot type stuff.
yeah, good points brought up. So I'll just like rather than reiterating, I think some of the best parts of Yu-Gi-Oh for me, I feel like have kind of, and deck building wise, have sort of like maybe kind of died in recent years. I feel like
Mhm.
the the dominance of hand traps and archetypes feels like a lot of decks sometimes build themselves. And I don't know if that's sometimes because of like just OCG being ahead of us, so a lot of things get solved fast. Maybe it's the culture of social media that has accelerated in the last 10 years, where the availability of information is just so prominent. But it feels like up until maybe like 2018, 2020, there was just so much experimentation that I feel like it could happen with Yu-Gi-Oh decks. But
Mhm.
in recent years, it feels like, there's just been so many decks like Tri Brigade, Evil Twin, Salmon Great, that just feel like, okay, here's all of your engine. You always play this, you always play that, you always play this, and here's all the hand traps you play. And I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh has declined in its deck building. And I think one of the best examples is like, if you look historically at something like Edison format, the fact that people are still coming up with new strategies and stuff this long after, I think if you were to like, let's say, play historical Photon Hypernova format in 10 years, would we really be able to be breaking that format in the same way that people are breaking Edison today? I don't really feel like it would, but maybe, I could be wrong, but it just, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
It's hard to say because people probably
Yeah.
maybe thought the same thing back in 2010, right? They were like, I don't know, these decks are so good, that's why we're playing them. Why, who would ever come up with something better? But I definitely see and it is kind of a counter argument to what I said, right? Because theoretically in Yu-Gi-Oh as well, you're allowed to put every card in every deck, but practically when you're deciding to play, I don't know, a Salamangreat deck or an Unchained deck or whatever, right? Like it does dictate a fair amount of the available cards to you, right? Because like you're like, okay, well, that's like a solid 25, 30 cards that are pretty much set in stone for my deck. And if I want to take it competitively, the remaining 10, 15 cards should probably be cards out of that non-engine staple card area, right? I'm not going to put whatever another, like, you're not going to pair two archetypes together very often these days anymore, right? Like I don't know, the upcoming like Ubel Unchained is like a difference, like an argument, like or like Labyrinth and Unchained together, right, was a thing sometimes, which I think I always find these things incredibly cool when they happen, but they did happen a lot more back in the day, right? It was a lot easier to do that when the games would take longer and the card pool was a little smaller and decks didn't feel like a large portion of them was predetermined when you decided for a certain deck.
Yeah.
I love
Not to
like
like
pile decks and stuff. Go on, Joseph.
I was gonna say not to jerk you off too much, Josh, but like I love the like decks like Bestial Runic that are just like a pile of small synergies where it's like, oh wow,
No, that's
these
fine, you
cards
can
all
say
work
that.
together. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I just wish there were I wish that type of deck building. It's like a mental model that people have like talked themselves out of, I think, in like
Hmm.
the modern era of deck building is like people just aren't looking for those types of interactions anymore, I guess.
Maybe we're just not looking for them, but I feel like sometimes, in some respects, you do have to maybe say like perhaps the way archetypes and cards are being designed in such a build a deck format,
Yeah,
right?
for
Like,
sure.
you
For
look at
sure.
something like Tirashizu, there was no deck building like in that format, right? Like it was all about the gameplay, it was all about the mirror, it was all about how strong you were, right? I feel like there just wasn't room for
I mean,
innovation.
funnily enough, we sometimes even criticize that when like cards can go into any deck, right? We ask like, hey, where's the restriction on this, right? Because it's like, because Yu-Gi-Oh is a game with so much like freedom in its actions and you can do whatever you want and all that kind of stuff. It is very dangerous to design cards that can go into any deck, right? Because naturally people are going to put the cards into the deck where they are the most broken and create the best interactions, and you're like, okay, well, now that I've put this card into that deck, it suddenly becomes a problem because it's too powerful, right? And so it's really hard. How are you going to allow people to use cards only in some archetypes where they would be cool to be used in, as opposed to like the archetype where they get the most value and just break the game, right? So it
Mhm.
feels like something that you just have to come to terms with when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh. It's like, okay, archetypes are going to be a thing now, right? More than they were back in the day because of the ever-growing card pool, and like if you allow too many cards to be played in all the decks, you're just going to end up with decks that are way too powerful. Um, so yeah, I guess that's kind of a thing.
Do you think reducing the number of just physical cards per archetype would be a good step forward? Like instead of archetypes having like 10 cards, maybe they just have like 4 or 5, and then you're kind of forced to try and find synergies.
I guess, yeah, as long as those synergies exist, as long like the problem then is, how do you make a good archetype that is like synergistic with some other archetypes, and how do you make sure that they are not too broken together and all? I don't know, because then what you're doing is when you make such a small archetype, it has to be pairable with other cards, right? You can't put restrictions on it that say you can only play that archetype or summon that archetype for the rest of the turn, because then it's not going to be playable because it doesn't have enough cards. But if you make it compatible with other archetypes, then you have to be really careful.
Yeah, that's why I really liked Sword Soul, for example. Like, it felt like that deck was just made to be really well designed with Tenyi, for example, right? Like, that was the synergies were just kind of there.
It's something they can definitely do with the less used or less popular types in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like Worm, for example, was a type where it's relatively easy to create some Worm synergies without the danger of, okay, well, that's going to be crazy, right? But like, um because Worm is just a type that doesn't have that many cards, and especially a lot of them are not like good. And so like it's okay, well, let's just create 2 or 3 archetypes that are all worms, and they kind of work together, and then it's this cool mishmash of a couple archetypes, and that's like easy to do.
I mean, that's why I've been really enjoying Lightsworn recently. Like, it's literally like Bestial, Lightsworn,
Yeah.
you know, like just baby dragons, like just all these like really cool synergies and stuff. Like,
There are definitely exceptions to the thing where you say like, okay, you can't do that. You have to be really careful with making stuff that's splashable. But like Bestials, for example, are like, in my opinion, a great, a well-designed archetype at this time point. Like, where now that Magnamut is limited, it feels like perfectly balanced and like goes in a couple decks, not in every deck, but they're also like good standalone cards that people side deck sometimes. But in general, like I think that is that approach I wish we had more of, right?
hmm. Do you like the baby dragons? Because I like this idea of like, here's, I guess, technically an archetype. It's 2 cards. And then over the years, people have found so many different decks to like put them in. Maybe more stuff like that could be kind of cool, right?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
What's it like in other games? Like, is there just generic neutrals that you can throw into like Runeterra cards and Runeterra decks and Magic decks? Like, where's like the pile stuff in that game? Like, is that like a thing?
I don't know anything about Runeterra. But, I mean, there are cards that see play in most things in most formats. I don't think there is anything
Well, they're called
in
artifacts
Magic.
or something, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, so much of Magic is like format dependent. Like Force of Will is in a lot of Legacy decks, for instance. But like, I don't think there's anything that's like as ubiquitous as a card like Ash Blossom, right?
Hmm.
It feels like other decks are trying to solve this problem of not every card being able to play it with every other card in all circumstances by just like, because you mentioned Runeterra, I also realize I think it's the same for like One Piece or whatever, where like you're just limited to, the cards are divided into subgroups of like, in Runeterra it's regions, in One Piece it's colors, in Digimon it's colors, and it's like you can just only play 2 colors at the same time in Runeterra, for example, right? You get to pair any 2 regions with each other, but you can't play more than 2 at the same time. And I think One Piece, it's like the color of your leader or whatever it's called determines which cards you are able to play. Um, and some of them have 2 colors, some of them have 1.
Interesting. All right. That is it for all of the major topics and stuff. There's anything else you guys want to segue into or bring up that we haven't talked about, or things on your mind that we've not really dug deep enough on? Or feel free to go ahead.
I'm trying to think.
Talk a little bit about the content creation sides of things, potentially, I suppose, since we're all creating content in the game. Like, we talked a little bit about that social aspect, but creating content for Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been obviously a blessing and a amazing opportunity, I think, for all of us here to be able to turn what we really love and what we really enjoy into like a real, actual, legitimate career. And here we are after this long. How do we feel about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Like content creation space in general?
Oh, I talk about this all day. Holy. Oh, it is so crazy that that it has evolved in the way that it has. Even as little as like what, like 6 or 7 years ago, if you had told people, yeah, there's like multiple people in the Yu-Gi-Oh space where it's like their job to do and play Yu-Gi-Oh, it would be like, nah, I don't really believe that. It's crazy, I think, how far we've come, even since like COVID. Like, it used to be Yu-Gi-Oh content used to be terrible, man.
It almost feels like we're like slightly behind, maybe sometimes, but it might be because
Yeah.
of the limiting factor that exists with being a physical card game rather than digital. But I feel like it's definitely accelerated in recent years, no?
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean Master Duel was a huge blessing for content creation. And I mean obviously it was designed in order to be one. But yeah.
How's the transition into content creatorship bit for you, Josh?
I mean, I did it together with Master Duel release, right? Like beforehand, I never really thought about it, and I just like started doing it for fun. I never thought of it as something that would be a possible career. I just did it while I was in university, and I was like, okay, let's play this Master Duel game. Might as well stream it. And it is crazy to see where it's taken me. It's not something I would have ever imagined, especially with how Yu-Gi-Oh's pricing structure has been. I don't want to get into that with too much detail, but it's like I never expected to make a living from being good at this game, right? Which was always kind of sad when I looked at other games where that was possible. I think at certain times you could definitely live off of being just a good player at Magic without having to actually create content or something like that. But I never expected that from my hobby, basically. So for me, it was always just that. Um, so the fact that it's turned into what it is now, I'm very, very thankful for. Which is also the biggest thing about Master Duel for me, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I think the paper card game is still always, for me personally, more enjoyable than Master Duel. But the fact that Master Duel creates like a very nice visual to play Yu-Gi-Oh on stream and all that kind of stuff is like also super valuable in different ways, right? So even though I enjoy playing the paper game myself more, for streaming, Master Duel is a real blessing and really, really cool. And Yeah, I don't know. I can just say I have a blast creating content for this game, and the community is great. I don't. I assume that's also the case in other card games, but I'm just like, for that part, I'm just happy that Yu-Gi-Oh is big enough, because that's, in reality, that's what's the most important part, right? You can be as passionate and as good as content creation as you want about anything, but it needs to be a big enough space, right? And I think Yu-Gi-Oh is right at that point where it is a big enough space for people to make a living off of it, which I don't think is the case for some other card games, right? And so I'm just happy that the game that I picked as a kid coincidentally now is big enough to the point where it's actually possible, right?
I guess to round off, more of a question open to the chat, I suppose. But why do you think the average person still plays after this long, or why do they get into the game? What do you think are, like, if you were to put like some of like a couple of like main pull factors, what do you think is like so attractive about this game?
Yeah, so are you familiar with like the sunk cost fallacy?
Do you think so? Really?
I know. No, I think
I feel like that
this is
might
the
be
thing
to
that
an
people.
extent for some people, right?
Yeah, that's true. But the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh that I think people never say is that it's so easy to quit. It's like so easy to just put down. You're out for 3 weeks, and then the metagame has changed in such a fashion that you're like, I don't need to get back into it. Yet for some reason, no one ever seems to. Isn't that weird? That like it's one of the games that requires the most upkeep, the most attention paid to the game. And so many people are like, "Oh, I could stop this tomorrow," but no one ever feels like they really do. And I really do think it is a type of gameplay and a type of back and forth that really doesn't exist anywhere else. And people can't help but come back to it when they feel they're missing that type of thing.
I feel like the way Yu-Gi-Oh works is that it's such a social game, right? In person
Yeah.
anyway. Like, you can't play it alone. You have to have an opponent. And I think a lot of people have built up a huge, or maybe not huge, but have built up a very strong bond with the people around them or their community. And to quit Yu-Gi-Oh would be to quit certain friendships, certain connections, certain relationships. And I think that is a huge thing that I feel like is probably one of the biggest, I would say, negatives to quitting. As for joining, I don't know. I think really just like the speed of the game, right? Like it's good. It's the worst and best thing of Yu-Gi-Oh. I think is that crazy
Something
turn one
that's
that people
really
cry
hard
about.
to learn, I think, is also just more rewarding than something that's easy or easier to learn, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, one of this big criticism about Yu-Gi-Oh is actually what's going to make it feel even more rewarding, I think.
Yeah.
All right. I think this is a good little round off of the subject and topic. So
I mean, this was easy 90 minutes.
easy clap. Easy
Yeah,
clap.
I was like, I didn't know how long that you usually do these, but I was like, are we going over? I feel so bad.
No, we
No,
usually
it's
like
usually
about
like we
19.
try to aim for like 90.
Yeah, we started with 1 hour, but people just wanted more. So yeah, we're
More
trying to go.
yapping.
Yeah, they like the yapping. So if you guys have been enjoying the yapping, all the socials, etc., in the comment down below as usual. Subscribe to the Heart of the Cast channel if you haven't already. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. Yeah, that's where you can find us all. And of course, Joseph, thank you for joining us. I'm sure you already know who he is. Needs no introduction, but as mentioned, socials, etc., will be in the description. So thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone for tuning in this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye bye.
Peace out.